last month. Can you see? Can you see the slides?
Mm.
Okay, great. Anyway, last month I attended Camp AI, which is 3 days of workshops that came with homework. And the homework involved creating assignments for classes. So I worked on a few things, and this is the one that I decided to use this semester. And um, it's basically an assignment that looks at how large language models are trained on human text and how they demonstrate biases. Okay. Um, and when you create an assignment for your class, you always want to keep the objectives in mind, right? So the objectives are not just about looking for those biases. I'm also asking students to think about the ethical questions of using artificial intelligence, regardless of the profession or the field. So for this assignment, we're basically just doing an experiment where we have a prompt and we run it a few times, but changing the identity variables of the prompt. Okay? So this is basically an experiment. It's not a controlled scientific experiment, um, but it's one that works very well with ChatGPT. And I'm using the basic version of ChatGPT. Students don't have to sign up to use it. Okay? So we have a few different tests. The public affection test, the microaggression test, the dressing room test, my personal favorite. Um, and then you run it a few times. You change the identity variables of the test and see what you get. And then students take all of that output and they start looking at the differences. And the differences, believe it or not, are quite striking. So if we run one, we just want to use a heteronormative identity. Now, to anticipate a question, I tested this without any identity markers. Cloud, just give the character a name. And it was very similar to run one. If I introduce white, the conversation turns to money, which I think is interesting. If I introduce race, it does other things. If I introduce multiple identity markers, it really starts moving around the room. So you want your prompt to be somewhat underspecified to give the chatbot enough room to move around like a Roomba and look for what it needs. Okay. So this is how I set up the prompt. It's very basic. It's not too elaborate. Now, when you do a prompt, you want to give examples. I'm not doing that. I'm just asking for a story and choosing, um, changing the identity. Person A might be Chloe, a cisgender white woman, Chloe, a black trans woman, and then we see what we get. Okay, so this assignment ends with a reflection essay that makes connections to course readings because we are covering these issues in class and looking at a few different things: performance, othering, intersectionality, and sexual citizenship. Um, and I think whatever class you're teaching, uh, especially if you're teaching in the social sciences, uh, it's really useful to think about integrating something that forces students to consider the ethics and the pitfalls of artificial intelligence connected to large language models. Okay, so just a few things to keep in mind. First, different applications give you different results, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. Second, these applications remember everything we do. So you want to be careful if you're running any kind of experiment like this, and you should always create an alternative assignment for students who don't wish to use these tools. Okay. Now, we actually joke that our students are relying too much on these tools. But yes, there are some students who say I don't want to use them. And I think that's great. Anyway, that's it. That's how I'm using it.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm so excited to try to adapt this to my own teaching. Thank you. And yes, we will share slides with everyone who's registered afterward. Thank you so, so much. Kenny.
Thank you. Yeah, pull up my slides. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the ways in which the things that I value when it comes to using AI, um, and the things that I'm concerned about when it comes to using AI. So the first thing that is very important to me is that whenever I'm using AI, that it has to express my voice. And this is something that I've told my students because often, and I'm sure you've all had this, you get students turn in something that was produced by AI and it doesn't sound like them and it doesn't come from their perspective. Um, and when I give them feedback about that, because I've caught many students in that and doing that, I express to them how, especially when they run it through AI after they've already maybe made some notes, how it loses their personal voice. So for me, in order to maintain my voice in in anything that I produce in I it requires a lot of consistency and persistence and multiple iterations. Um, so anything from like I use it often for communications, for example. I'm not always super clear in my tone and the way that I want to express things in email communications, for example. And so if I notice, like if I feel like it's coming across kind of angry or just doesn't have the tone that I want, I'll run it through AI and um, uh, I'll kind of look at it and make sure that number one, it still is in my voice, but that it's also expressing the kind of tone that I'm looking for. I use this sometimes for syllabus language. I actually developed an AI policy in AI, which I guess is a little meta, but it worked really well because I was able to express to the AI the things that were important to me, the things that I valued, and then what it produced was something in um, understandable language that I'm not very writing is not my forte, so I'm much more visual and creative in that way. And so it was able to develop the language that I was really looking for. And again, if it didn't feel like it was coming from my voice, then I continued to go through it with the AI, or at that point, I would just kind of rewrite certain elements of it so that it did reflect me. I've also used it to create website copy. So whether that's websites that I've developed at work or at home, sometimes I do some I develop websites for myself and my friends and other people that uh, organizations that I work with. And again, as I said, writing is not my forte. So sometimes just getting copy that looks good on a website it's really easy to do. The other thing that I've done is creative writing with AI, which is kind of fun. So um, I did this kind of experiment during MLK Day where I really wanted to write something that commented on the moment of what we're experiencing and relate it back to Martin Luther King Jr. And I actually ended up with something that was really profound and really beautiful. And I posted it in social media. I even created an image, which I'll show you in a little bit, to go with it. Uh, and it was a really fun kind of experiment. And maybe it didn't necessarily completely reflect my voice, but uh, I definitely felt like I was in there. The other thing that is really important to me is that AI has strengths and it has a lot of weaknesses. And the things that to me are really that it does really well are things like pattern recognition, probability, uh, processing things in bulk, summarizing. So I've used it in the past for revising a resume or cover letter to align it to a job requirement. Um, or job requirements, summarizing books or articles and being able to pull out key themes, developing a literature review outline. Literature reviews are not my thing, and I hate writing them. So anything I can get help with in that process really speeds things up for me because I really take a lot of time. Brainstorming, just coming up with ideas. I find AI is really good at that, outlining a course or a workshop, trying to get a sense of what that course needs to contain. But again, the prompt is so critical in this case because you really have to be sure what you're looking to get from it in order to get quality. Developing smart learning objectives. Learning objectives are not always easy to write. And so getting some ideas going is really helpful. Creating quiz questions. If you have content already, it can tease out some quiz questions and it can produce varying levels of difficulty in terms of distractors and the complexity of the questions themselves. I've used it to analyze legal documents, contracts. I even ran the big beautiful bill through there just to see what is there in there to be concerned about. And Project 2025, I did that too. um, Creating anagrams. So I created this organization at CUNY called LIFT at CUNY Collective. It stands for Learning, Design, Innovation, and Flexible Technology. Let me tell you, it took a while to come up with that anagram or acronym. Acronym. That's acronym or anagram, whichever. Um, Acronym. Uh, uh, it took me a long time to come up with that, and I ran through a lot of different options with AI. I've had it help me with tax returns. I've had it help with meal planning. I do thought experiments a lot. I actually try to have it help me develop a matter transporter like in Star Trek. um, Learning a language. I created a custom GPT to practice German. Um, and it's also really good at helping to define parameters or requirements. So right now, I'm in the process of trying to find a software solution for assessment reporting and accreditation. And so I was able to use ChatGPT to develop a set of requirements that I can send to various software companies and say, this is what we're trying to do. Can your software do this? And it's been very helpful for that. I've also used it for creating rubrics, which is amazing. It produces them in tabular format. I'm probably running out of time, but I'll be quick. Um, One thing to be very concerned about is hallucinations. These are real, they're not theoretical, and that happens a lot more than you might think. AI, for example, is really bad at academic writing. Citations, it pulls from thin air. They're often not accurate, even when it has accurate information to draw from. It sometimes um, uh, puts names that don't exist there or pulls in-text citations instead of other things. And then verifying the accuracy can often be a lengthier process than just writing it from scratch. So I find it's much better to do things like outlines than to have finished writing. Um, so some key things that I make sure of is I don't trust and I verify. I ask AI to be accurate and use only verifiable sources, which sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't. I ask AI to fact check itself. That sometimes helps. And I use as detailed prompts as I possibly can. And if I need to, I iterate as much as I possibly can. Last thing here, AI is really good at bringing imagination to life. Um, I know that creating images and videos takes a lot of energy, and it's not great for the environment, but there are certain times, I'm not an illustrator, that you can produce really incredible imagery that you would never be able to do otherwise. So some things that I've done here for various courses, I had a quote by Abigail Adams, and I couldn't find a good picture, so I had AI produce one for me. This is a picture of HIV virus and other things for a health and safety course. This is that MLK picture I talked about earlier. I use it to create images for yoga classes that I teach. Some presentations that I've done, having just images in there. Again, these are from health and safety courses. And then this is my sister's dog, and I just thought that was funny. So I love to use that in doses for image creation because it's really wild what it can come up with. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love all of these ideas and like the criteria, right? And like you made it really clear, steps that we could walk our students through that we could use. And I love the picture of the dog and Abigail Adams, who actually looks like she brushes her teeth in that photo. But if you watch the Adams
Might
series,
not have been historically accurate.
has very different teeth. Oh, thank you so much. Alfonso, you're up next.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Alfonso, and I teach again in our bilingual education program at Hunter. I didn't create slides. I'm a notoriously horrible multitasker, and I only have one screen. So I'm going to talk, and thank you so much for listening. And I'm happy to share links to all the resources that I'll mention today. So again, I teach some of our clinical classes at Hunter. I feel very lucky to do that. I teach, for example, a biliteracies course in Spanish. I teach also instruction in Spanish, and I teach a bilingual education student teaching seminar and practicum to our wonderful teacher candidates during their last semester. And so like many of you, I've been reading about AI, I've been talking to my colleagues about AI, and really playing with AI for a number of years now. And I'm moving into the spring semester with this sort of mantra, right? That, a lot of us, right, we want our students to be transparent about their use of AI. And so similarly, I'm trying to be as transparent as possible with our teacher candidates about how I'm using AI as a teacher educator. And so I tell our teacher candidates in our seminar, I often try to model practices that I want to encourage them to use in their classrooms, right? And so one of those practices that I'm going to share with you today is using AI for translations, also known as machine translations, which can be very controversial. And so I'm bringing up this topic from an equity perspective. And so to do that, I often refer to this really powerful qualitative study from Dr. Kathy Amanti from 2019. She's from Georgia State University, and her work is around the invisible work of dual language bilingual educators. And so she talks about these 6 dual language bilingual education teachers who, like many of us, have worked in bilingual education, have to select and create curriculum materials in languages other than English, right? And so what that often entails is doing research online during teachers' own time. So this means evenings and weekends to create materials for their students in their home languages. In the case of Dr. Amanti's study, this would be in Spanish and French. When we talk about curriculum materials, we're talking about textbooks, library books, manipulatives, presentations, student worksheets, charts, posters. You get it. And so what Dr. Amanti basically tells us in the study is we don't often think about the hard work of translation, right? Especially in education. And she says, we really have to think about this added work for our teachers and think about the working conditions in school so that we can retain awesome teachers. And from my experience, right, as an educator, as a human being, we don't really think a lot about translations. We don't think about how hard it is, right? How much it's an art and a science. What Amanti says in this study is we really think about translations as like this natural extension of bilingual and multilingual individuals. Like it's a natural part of our being. And so what ends up happening is we don't in schools, we don't give resources and we don't allow time for these teachers to create these materials, often from scratch. If you think about today in New York City public schools, we have this HMH interreading curriculum, right, which is mandated now in grades K through 6, or it's one of the mandated literacy curricula. As Spanish speakers, I think we're lucky in the sense that we have a Spanish version of this curriculum available in some schools, right? It's called Arriba la Lectura. And so I also work with Mandarin speaking teacher candidates at Hunter. And FYI, I've learned from them this curriculum is not available in Mandarin Chinese, right? And so I know, for example, a group of bilingual education teachers in the Chinese English dual language program at PS 94, the Henry Longfellow School with Principal Gonzalez. And these teachers advocated for themselves to receive per diem rates so that after school and in the summer, they could translate those anchor charts from HMH into Mandarin, right? With those literacy strategies. And so that's how what I'm sharing with you today is I'm approaching the use of AI in bilingual education from this equity point of view, right? So this semester in the student teaching seminar with my bilingual education teacher candidates, I'm going to share Dr. Kathy Amanti's study, right, on the invisible work of bilingual teachers. I'm going to share a chapter from this book that I've been reading with my colleagues at Hunter called Teaching with AI by Bowen and Watson. There's a chapter on AI literacy that I think is really important. And I'm also sharing with my teacher candidates a New York Times article on the global frenzy of AI and how it's destroying the environment and consuming vast amounts of water across countries in the world, because I want to give our teacher candidates context and information to make ethical decisions around how they want to or not want to use AI, right? And so I'm being more transparent with my students about how I'm using it. Just like Kenny mentioned, I am using it to create really amazing rubrics. And shout out to Liz, Professor Liz Klein, who's been telling this to me for a number of years, I think now. So really excellent rubrics. And I'm noting that in the syllabus, in the rubrics, I'm noting that I'm using ChatGPT to create them. But that's my takeaway to share with you all, is to consider the use of AI to help bilingual and multilingual learners and their teachers to consider allowing translations to happen, which are historically not allowed in classrooms, whether they're bilingual or monolingual. In the biliteracies course that I teach, I work with, that we teach, a number of us, we do this activity called Así se dice, it means this is how you say it, which is an awesome instructional activity from Dr. Katia Escamilla and her colleagues, where the teacher works with her students to translate a piece of text, and they will think about the translation, whether it's conceptual or literal. It's a really powerful activity. And so we go through that process just to understand how much of that it entails, right? All the thinking and the creativity that is involved in translations. And again, translations, just like translanguaging, is such an essential part of being bilingual, multilingual. So I hope that, we make space for it in classrooms. And that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Alfonso. Muchas gracias. I had a question about translanguaging and you answered it, so thank you. Really, really amazing. I appreciate you so much. Liz, you're up next.
Cool. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about how I use AI in the classroom and professionally and personally. So I'm also going to focus on the no paywall situation, because I can get lured in every day with $5 a month, 10, 20, 30, keep going. So the first thing is I have students experimenting with AI as part of the learning experience in literacy classes. So one of the activities I did this past term in a teaching and writing class was I gave an assignment in small groups for students to use the following AI tools here and to create a writing rubric checklist for themselves. And here's the reaction I got from some of the students. Whoops. Some never used AI at all. One person said it was unethical and went on and on. The majority loved it, and they told me that I should narrow down the focus. And I said, no, that was the point of the whole thing, for you to do that. And they did. And some of them who were very advanced were able to compare the checklists that were made by ChatGPT to Perplexity to Canva AI. And sharing this out was really helpful to them. Also, when I noticed that when I need to create like blends and drills for the reading class, it's really easy to put it in ChatGPT, of course, check it, make sure it's correct. And I also cite ChatGPT, so I model for students. So these are some simple zero-cost tools, which I love, and ChatGPT even extends it a little farther and gives some differentiation. So I'm working on a grant in reading, and one thing I want to do, because I'm a special educator, is differentiate for students on different levels. Now, this is not only for K through 12. You can do this for adult learners who struggle. So I asked ChatGPT to change the Lexile level. The Lexile is the complexity of text. I specifically chose Great Expectations because it's a difficult text. It's not necessarily culturally responsive. And it came out with some suggestions for me, which was really cool. It suggested text pairings, other texts I can teach with. It suggested side-by-side comparison. It did a beautiful side-by-side comparison, and it just went on and on. And then I asked it to make a comic strip, and then I asked it to make it more culturally responsive. So here's some of the things it came up with. It suggested this to me: questions, writing prompts, aligning it to the next gen standards, which are New York State standards. A choice of a reading menu. I didn't even ask it, and it came up with that. Paired passages. Here's the comic book I came up with for Great Expectations. This one is not great, but still, I'm thinking of those non-readers or students who struggle with reading, who really would benefit from a comic book. And you could go and put this in again. And I'm going to share some graphic tools in a little while. Here's another one. I said illustrate. Great Expectations. And I actually had the students, we did a class-wide project-based learning. We did a literary magazine. We did 3 of them. They did their own writing. I had students do artwork from all of these programs. I taught them how to use it. I won't open up this just yet because I'm going to show one. And I also used Adobe, which is now free for if you're at Hunter. I think other CUNYs might have it too. So I on a personal level, that was one of the prompts. I found perchance, I think I was looking at a gaming article, and I found perchance, and it's amazing. It gives you so many choices of illustrations that you could make. And so let's say I want to have, and I looked this up to make sure it was legit as an artist. Let's say I have a conceptual idea and I put my prompt in. Can I paint from there? Sure I can, because now it's mine. So here's I asked it to pull up a picture of a butterfly stamp, and it did. And there's like about 25 different art styles in Perchance AI. And there's also a story generator, which I never told my students about because I don't want them generating stories, but it might be fun for, if you're doing something like generate one from AI and then compare it to your own. And there's an image gallery where you can look at other people's, and then they have a video generator too, but I tried it. It's really slow. But I'm going to show you what I did. And I did this morning. So I took the image here and I made my own. I'm a painter, so I made my own painting from there. And so I'm going to show you a few more. So I put in the prompt, codependent relationship, broke up with partner, and it came up with about 10 pictures. You could go on and on and on. And then I painted from there. And here's a note card that I did. I said, create a picture of rolling hills with flowers. And then I came up from there. So I had my students do this too. And then we put it in Book Creator. So we write our own books, we illustrate, we make our own magazines. So this is more of this speaks to a lot of students who just, they're visual and they need to use multisensory. The Japanese fan I had to put in a few times. I came up with very stiff Japanese fans, but I wound up painting a picture I was really happy with. And a summary of this is the potential to increase literacy for adult learners and for them to use it in their field is amazing. I focus right now on simple AI tools to avoid a paywall. Some of these I'll be using in a site grant that I got. I love Perchance, but I'm going to show you a few others that there's the paywall, but not when you started at first. Limited use is inevitable. Now they have something called credits, which my student taught me about. They give you a certain amount of credits, and they're used up fast. So this morning I tried DALL-E for the second time. The first, I think I tried it last year, and it was very slow moving. But I put in make a butterfly stamp, and I thought this was pretty nice and pretty decent. But then it told me that I had used up some credits. So that's something to know about. You can also use Adobe Firefly. Adobe Express is good. Canva, the students really, really love, but I find that it's not as rich. And then I tried Raphael. So there's no sign-in required. The only problem is like Canva, it has a watermark for the free use. And my prompt was simply make a pretty spider web. It came up with all the pictures that look similar. And this one is not visual, but I found that there's something called Instruction AI. It's really good for making student assignments. I asked it to come up with a vocabulary game for students with autism on good citizenship, and it came up with an amazing vocabulary game with it really spelled out concisely as it promises. So I was really thrilled with it. Also comes, it's free up to a certain point. So that's my use of AI.
Wow, thank you so much. So many good ideas. I love this. I love also getting to see your own artwork was really fun. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And your prompts are so interesting and engaging. Thank you so, so much. Virginia, you're up next.
Hi. Um, Hidden talents of Liz. I love it. And I have wonderful ideas for what to do with some of my, I teach the instructional technology course in our SPED program. And so I love the ideas that Catherine came up with that I'm going to have them play around with their prompts and think about how that changes things. So thank you for that. That's taking care of an assignment coming up for me. So I guess I'll start first with how I use it in class. So because I teach that instructional technology course and I've taught it for several years, it's had to have AI kind of layered into it as it's crept up on us, and asking students to think about not just what tools they use, but whether those tools have matched to the students that they're working with, considering the student first, are we using these tools to think for us, or are we using them to help us as thought partners? So that's kind of the approach that that I take when I'm using the AI tools as well. Personally, I'll use them for like in my house with 3 kids, we have vegetarians, we have someone with celiac. Like I use my favorite use of AI personally is to give it the parameters of what exists in our household needs for food. I ask it to give me like a week of meals and the grocery list and the recipes, and the whole thing comes out in like 10 seconds, and I'm baffled at how long that used to take me to try to come up with something people would eat. So my kids are enjoying like trying these new recipes. So some of them we don't remake, but there's always something new in the week, that's kind of interesting. And you can, in terms of iterations, I know several of us talked about that, but you can say, I have a kid that doesn't like broccoli. After it's given you everything, and it'll go back through and take the broccoli out, or make it kid friendly, or the iterations are really key if you're not great at initially coming up with the prompt that you meant for it to know, you know. So that's my favorite personal use of it. In class, I'm kind of jumping around, sorry, but in class, I do use it to make rubrics. I also make case studies. I don't think anybody's talked about that yet, but that's been very helpful for me. Um, just to have students to take the creative piece out where I can, even though I love that kind of stuff, it takes time, right? So if you can write a good prompt and say, I need, a 12-year-old student who's in an ICT classroom. These are, the IEP goals, fake. Don't ever put real IEP goals on a real kid. But, if you can generate the big things that you need to be part of the case study, then it can tell the story for you so that your students can have a good example that you didn't have to design, right? And you designed it, but you didn't have to write it. You can even have, like, after it gives you the case study in the next iteration, you can say, please give me 3 questions that a good special educator would need to consider when thinking about this child's, whatever, reading skills or whatever. So that's very useful. I've given it content that I've made and asked it to come up with one-pagers for students. So, key takeaways for it to, you definitely have to look it over and make sure it's what you meant for the key takeaways to be, because of the cautionary tales others have told here today. But it can lift a little bit of that academic load from you, especially if you're giving it content that you designed and you meant for it to have. If you can ask it to help you with what you ask the students to do with it, or how you are gonna, what you should be looking for and how you evaluate their responses, I think that's been very helpful for me as an educator. I also try to think about how my students will use it, and then jump ahead of them in doing that, and then having them analyze what ChatGPT did, for example. So in one of the clinical courses I teach, they have to make lesson plans. And so I'll have ChatGPT take our lesson plan template and make 2 or 3 lesson plans, and then they sit in pairs and they look at what it made, and we talk about why it's not great, or what could have been better. And kind of by doing that, I'm hoping that I'm modeling for them, like, hey, don't just plunk this in, right? Like, and if you do use it, let's think of how this student who maybe generated this lesson plan through ChatGPT, how could they have used what we know good educators do to design this differently? Or, even what kinds of prompts could we put? Where could we ask ChatGPT questions that would make this lesson plan richer for our students? Differentiation's another great one, Liz. I've used it to help me look at things I've designed to say, how could I level this for students with different skills and strategies? In terms of accessibility, I'll take an assignment that I've made, and ask ChatGPT to give me, kind of an overview of the accessibility of that activity, and to give some ideas for how I might make it more accessible for someone with vision impairments or someone with mobility issues. Or alternatives, what are some to generate choices? Like, if I've come up with one idea, I'll ask ChatGPT to be a thought partner to give me different versions of activities students could do that would yield the same opportunities for me to evaluate. So I'm using the same criteria to look at their learning, but I've asked ChatGPT to take my one good idea, hopefully good, and then make several other examples of how students could participate in that learning to show me those same outcomes. I think that for differentiation for special educators, that's like the biggest beef people have, other than trying to assess multiple products, is coming up with all those ideas for how to let your students participate differently is a really big creative act. So if you're a high school teacher who teaches multiple subjects and multiple times a day, that's a lot of work to ask someone to do with their lesson plans. And so to have a thought partner in that can be really useful. And then both for teachers, but also, just personally, I think that thought partner idea works for brainstorming, obviously, outlining. That one was another one that people came up with. But I also like the dialogue opportunities, knowing that there's like incredibly dangerous things that can happen when kids are like doing AI therapy and stuff like that, right? Like, barring that piece, which also comes with this, I think it can be useful to use AI as a dialogue partner for things like devil's advocate, right? Like, if you want to put your ideas in to see what opposing viewpoints would be, that can help you strengthen your own arguments. So whether that's you're preparing for an IEP meeting and you want to put in the big ideas, de-identified obviously of what subjects might be difficult to come up or, how we might address the student's needs, like just putting your ideas in and saying, what are some other perspectives that might come up? That can be a really good way to deepen, and enrich your own viewpoints, or maybe help you change your mind, right? If one of the perspectives didn't occur to you, that can be helpful. Um, I'm hopping back to personal because another thing about beyond groceries, I absolutely love ChatGPT. I have three teenagers, and it's very helpful sometimes if you want to run some scenarios through there too and say, what are some viewpoints on this issue? I'm my mother's daughter, but they're my kids, right? So does it matter if they fold their clothes, right? Like just things like that. Like, am I going to die on this hill, or maybe wrinkly clothes are in and I'm just old, right? Like some stuff like that can come up when you start to have a thought partner that's not just you in your head or the books that you read, but an opportunity to pull in lots of different voices while you're kind of thinking something through. And even once you've done those dialogues, to then have, again, the summary or like the one pager option of it, I think is really helpful where you can say, what are the big ideas or what were the big points of this conversation, the outcome of this dialogue. Um, that can kind of help you save some time on weaving back through or doing your own analysis and summary. Oh, and research. I forgot one really big one. I do a lot of interviewing and recording and video, and so and transcription because of that. And so I will use de-identified, transcripts and ask for what words came up the most in this, or what are some trends that emerged from this conversation. Um, and it's really interesting to see when you do that with multiple different, for example, I have teachers teaching Scratch to students that they tutor. So I have lots of recordings of conversations that happen in those moments, and I'm really fascinated at the computational thinking aspects of that. So when you analyze those different conversations and you're looking to see like how did these different teachers introduce these ideas to kids? What words did they use? What steps did they take? That's a lot of thinking and reading and processing and coding, and you can have a thought partner in supporting that analysis that I think is really, really a huge time saver. Um, okay. That's what I've got. We went everywhere in all different directions, but that's pretty standard if you know me. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So many good ideas. You gave me a lot, both for thinking through my teaching, but also my personal life, also my kids. So grateful to all of our speakers. And now we have some time for Q&A. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand